Hey guys, today we're not going to do comics tonight. Today I actually had a unique opportunity to sit down and just chat with Scott Snyder about DC Comics. He pretty much talks about Justice League, Batman, what happened back in his New 52 Batman run, how he feels about Brian Michael Bendis joining up with DC. For those of you guys who don't know, Scott Snyder is the guy who wrote Batman throughout the entirety of New 52. He's the guy currently writing Justice League. He wrote a book called American Vampire. He wrote Wytches. He got his start over with Batman Black Mirror. He's done a lot of things in the comic book industry, and he's very well respected in this industry. He's also very high up there at DC because he's, writing Justice League and handled their event DC Metal. So I just wanted to intro this to let you guys know, we filmed this, so you have footage of me talking to him, but he was filmed on his Skype, which means at times the audio may fall out of sync, at times the video may get a little grainy, but that's how we did this interview. Let me know what you guys think of the video. We tried not to cut anything major out. We tried to give you the full discussion because he was so incredible to talk to. I hope you guys enjoy. And if you do like him, make sure you check out his YouTube channel. The link to that is down below. And you go check out the latest issue of Justice League. I'll also link that down below. At the end of the video, he goes through a couple other projects that he's got coming out, which include more American Vampire, more Wytches, Batman Who Laughs comics, stuff like that. So check out the video. I was super hyped and fanboying hardcore while recording this, so I hope you guys enjoy. Yeah, so Justice League is going to go out tomorrow, so issue 6. I'm just trying to sort it out in my head.
So it focuses on Joker, and that's my favorite one so far. So
I love your portrayal of the Joker. Let's start with that. Okay, that's gonna be the beginning.
Okay, sure.
This portrayal of the Joker is definitely different from your New 52 Joker who ended up with Dynesium and all that other stuff. What inspires you to change the direction of the Joker to be this crazy guy? And the art style definitely really implies with a much wider smile, makes it look much bloodier.
Yeah, well, I love how adaptable he is as a character. To me, he's sort of like the devil. So I feel like whatever evil you need to sort of fit the story, he is happy to sort of assume that role. So here it's whatever sort of our hero's worst fear is, he sort of melds or molds himself into that sort of form. So in this story, he's different than he was in sort of our New 52 stuff where he was up against Batman. Here he's sort of part of a team. He might have other motives for his own benefit, but even as it stands, he's sort of playing the part in a way that's more theatrical, more fun for him, a little bit more kind of touch and go. He's a little more unpredictable, a little less kind of focused on taking down one hero. Here, you get to celebrate sort of all the facets of how nutty Joker is. So I love writing him in that regard because he's still just as evil as you'll see in the series. This whole issue that comes out this week is literally about how he's been trying to teach the world one joke since the beginning of his career and one punchline. And that punchline is basically that there's no point. We're all evil. You better laugh at it because there's no hope. And so it's almost like his whole act is, all the murder, all the mayhem, all of it is just to get everybody to laugh with him at this ridiculous idea that we should ever be hopeful. So the whole issue is really dark in terms of its portrayal of Joker. But at the same time, he's the Joker in this version where Superman Batman and Lex Luthor are fighting on Superman's brain, and Joker controls Martian Manhunter's fingers so that they go in through Superman's eyes and try and stab Batman as he's fighting inside Inner Space Superman. So he's a lot more sort of completely lunatic and out of control than I've ever gotten to play him before.
Okay.
It's a little bit more almost celebratory and big and over the top, whereas in my Batman he was extremely dark all the time. And we're doing a series called Batman Who Laughs in the late fall, and he'll be a big star in it, and he gets way back to sort of his dark nightmarish roots in that with Jock as well. So here it's a little fun to get to take a break from him as absolute pitch black Joker and instead play him off these other characters where he's still himself and he'll still cut your head off with a chainsaw pretty fast. But that said, he's almost enjoying pretending to be part of a team. So there's a certain exuberance that comes with that I love about him. It's almost more comedic.
Okay. Are you taking the ideas that, because speaking of it being a more comedic kind of approach to him, are you inspired, because you've mentioned Justice League Unlimited, and I get that vibe from the way you're portraying the entire book and the narration and stuff you're going throughout the entire story. Are you aiming for that Mark Hamill kind of classic Joker that a lot of us that grew up with the DC cartoons and stuff that we're all wanting to see and we all want to see return, but DC's kind of holding him off in the back. They never let him come back, it seems.
Well, he's definitely my favorite version of the Joker, and I got to meet Mark a couple times when he was, back when I was starting out before the Star Wars hype began again. And I will say he's the nicest guy like ever on the con circuit. I got to introduce him to my kids at New York this year, and he was obviously very in demand, and they met him and were taking a picture and talking to him, and his people came to take him away, and he was like, "Stop. I am not the Mark Hamill you're looking for." And it was just the best moment. I was like, "You're so cool." But yeah, I love the I love the sort of enthusiasm of the animated series, the kind of energy. It's one of the kind of Bibles that I turn to, that the Batman animated series, but also the Dwayne McDuffie, the Justice League series, Justice League Unlimited. So I am trying to kind of capture the spirit of that. I think part of the goal with Justice League, and I hope if anyone's not reading it, here's my pitch to you, is I want you to feel like this is a series that brings you all the greatest hits and the comfort food and the kind of the familiar, completely lovable and endearing aspects of everything Justice League, the Hall of Justice, the Legion of Doom, the classic lineup, and all of those things. But it takes those things to be, it starts with those things to be able to take you someplace really unexpected. So similarly, to go back to your question, Benny, like Joker, I want him to feel like that animated series Joker and his zaniness. But then what he does and where the story goes, I think will surprise people in terms of its darkness and its sort of, hopefully it's daring in a good way.
It definitely feels like a more mature version of the original cartoon, like the actual progression of that show. Because that was still bright. It was still fun for kids. We all kind of enjoyed it when we were kids. But your version is just so much darker. And the way that it's being drawn just really portrays like the true evilness of Lex Luthor and Joker and stuff like that. What about with the Justice League? One thing that I'm really enjoying about it is you have so much going on. And one of my biggest complaints when I'm reading a series of comics, especially with the amount of comics I have to read, so is when there's so much going on and they don't keep it connected. You don't feel like it's all a part of one big story. So how are you able to make this whole thing feel like one giant story and not just here's 5 different things that you wanted to put together and they're all just thrown into the pot and you're just, oh, I hope it all works out. Because it all feels like you're going in one direction as opposed to 5 directions.
Well, it is. I mean, it's one big story that we've been planning since we planned Metal. So Metal was our summer event last year with Greg Capullo, and it sort of introduced the idea that the multiverse itself has this dark underbelly called a dark multiverse. And at the end of that story, the source wall, which was the sort of the boundary around the entire DC universe, breaks. And so Justice League begins with that concept that the wall has broken. It's sort of turned the DC universe from a fishbowl, self-contained, into a fishbowl now poured into an ocean that's completely mysterious to the characters. And the opening shot in Justice League is of sort of the core power source of the entire multiverse that was in the source wall landing on Earth and nobody knowing what it is. Does it contain designs as to who made our universe? Does it contain blueprints as to what the universe might become? Is it alive? Is it dead? All of the secrets of the origins of the DC universe are contained within this thing. So to do something that big and crazy and have the Legion of Doom fighting over it with Lex Luthor and Grodd and Joker and Cheetah and Manta and the Justice League with Superman, Batman, Flash, you have to plan that stuff way in advance because otherwise you're going to be stepping on a lot of toes. And when you're dealing with mythology that's that grand, and we're literally going to, go back to the very origins, the Big Bang of the DC universe and explain a lot of new mythology, sort of touch on a lot of mythology that I love from everything from Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman, Jeff Johns, just so many great architects. It has to be like way, way sort of designed ahead of time. So we had a lot of summits back in 2017 about these different pieces. And so Justice League is a story that I've been planning for well over a year, and it has about a 50-issue scope. So I want this first arc called The Totality to feel almost like a shotgun blast of crazy fun and new concepts, new ideas, expanding different characters' mythologies. So every arc is going to focus a little bit on sort of blowing out a couple characters' mythologies where we're introducing new aspects to them. So, things that you felt really comfortable with, like the Flash, he's powered by the Speed Force, which connects the multiverse. Here in Justice League, because the source wall broke, we're introducing all of these new forces that are almost the antithesis of the forces that the heroes use. So instead of just the Speed Force, now the Still Force is something the Flash discovers. That's this kind of desire for the universe to stop. And the same way Green Lantern is totally familiar with the emotional spectrum and powered by the green power battery and all of that, he suddenly discovers there's an invisible emotional spectrum that's all of these things on the electromagnetic wavelength that he didn't know about. So there's ultraviolet, infrared, and there are all these dark, terrifying emotions. So that's this arc. Next arc, we're going to go into Aquaman and Wonder Woman and explain a little bit about magic, divinity, all of these kind of things, and create sort of counterpoints to what they do. So to do things that are that sort of nutty, I guess, or that ambitious, I guess, you know, for better or worse, it takes a lot of planning. So there's no flying by the seat of our pants here. This is something that's been very designed over sort of a 2 to 3 year plan. So I know when the story kind of ends and what it culminates in, and I can promise people out there, if you're just starting to read us now, you will very much be rewarded as you go. Every arc is pretty standalone, but builds on the last one. Connect that story of the totality and the kind of Legion of Doom and the Justice League fighting over this power source that's sort of the origin of the multiverse and trying to discover its secrets, runs for the entire 1.5 to 2 years, and culminates in something very special, I hope, that at the end of 2019. So about a year from now, you'll start to see it really build. But yeah, there's a lot of architecture. And it's one of the best things about working at DC right now is getting to collaborate with so many creators that I've admired for a long time and that I can actually call friends.
That's amazing. Because one thing, because I liked the run we had for Justice League at Rebirth, but my biggest complaint about the Justice League Rebirth run was it wasn't tied into everything happening. It seemed like a lot of what was going on there was being ignored by the rest of the books and the rest, you know, and just it wasn't a big picture kind of thing. And my biggest complaint about that original run was it didn't feel like you should Justice League should always be like the biggest book at DC in my opinion. Followed very closely by Batman because I'm such a fan. And it felt like Justice League was always like 8 or 9 on my list every week of what to read. It wasn't as big and epic as you thought it should be. And that's why when you started up your run with No Justice directly into this, it was like, this feels like Justice League. This feels like the whole team coming together for a giant event instead of just, we came together to fight something that doesn't make much sense.
Yeah,
you know?
well, and look, not in no way am I disparaging what came before. I'm a huge fan of Brian Hitch and Chris Priest and Jeff Johns, obviously. But I think for a long time, the book has been a bit siloed, partly because of schedule, partly because of the just sort of the logistics of it. But it always felt like these characters are larger than life and yet completely isolated, almost on an island. And
that was the confusing part for me because you would feel like they should be big.
Yeah. Well, that was I wrote this like kind of manifesto about it, as cheesy as that sounds, when I started Justice League. So I gave it to Jim Chung and to Jorge Jimenez, who are the two kind of main artists on it, with Francis Manipul now too. And it's funny, I swear, they're so good. I feel like I could basically write the phone book and be okay. But I gave them this like whole kind of mission statement. And the 3 things that I wanted to emphasize with Justice League were, first and foremost, exactly what you're talking about. Connectivity. Justice League should be a book that feels like it's the core heart and soul of the DCU. That means it reflects what's going on in the other books, but it also is a story driver, which even if it doesn't sell the most, or if it does, or whatever, the idea is for it to be a story tree that blossoms into other books when and how and if they want those stories to sort of play with in their runs. But eventually it will kind of become something that drives a lot of story in a lot of books. That's its purpose. All the biggest characters are in the book. So to have it sort of isolated doesn't make any sense. So it was about sort of, that's why we chose the Hall of Justice, for example. I wanted it to feel almost really, earthbound. I mean, Grant Morrison has become like a friend. I'm lucky to call him that at this point. He was always a great mentor to me and an idol. But when I was talking to him about his run on Justice League, which is one of my absolute favorite comic book runs of all time, he was saying the purpose of having the Watchtower, this base on the moon, was because he wanted the characters to feel larger than life, because at that time there hadn't really been a Justice League of America, and it hadn't had the 7 biggest characters in the world. It had been sort of more diffuse and more sort of all-encompassing. And so he wanted to say, these characters are almost so big they need the space on the moon. And I think it worked great. For me, I think at this particular moment and the story we're trying to tell, I want to show that the Justice League is in it with us. We're all in it together, the whole DCU, and you too as a reader. So we chose to use the Hall of Justice, and you can walk into that building. You can see the public areas. You can see the costumes. You can see the trophy room. You might even see Batman might be in disguise behind you, like listening to your conversation without you knowing it, or in the
I could see him
cafeteria
doing
spying on you, right?
He
always
just
does
gets
it.
bored. He's like, oh, I'm going to go see what people are saying about me.
He does. You'll see it. You'll see. I think it's in issue 9. He actually does that. Well, we want it to feel inclusive and sort of embrace the entire DCU that way and make it feel like it's sort of a root system within it. The second thing that was really important to me was that it felt epic. It felt bigger than anything that came before when it comes to the threats they're up against, the challenges. And so this story is as big as I could go. It's my love letter to the entire DCU, where essentially right now, because of what happened last year, the multiverse is broken. The source wall has a hole in it and the universe is slowly bleeding to death, bleeding energy out. And so these characters, the Justice League, are going to have to figure out how to save the entire multiverse as this begins to get more and more dire. So it's a story that's going to touch on everything from sort of the mythologies that were created in the crisis before, all the multiple crises that we've done at DC. It's going to touch on corners of the DCO I think you might not expect, from magic and divinity to sort of the farthest cosmic reaches with Adam Strange and Starman and all kinds of stuff like that as well. But I want it to be something that says, this is who we are, this is what DC is about, and we're going to take and the third thing was I wanted to go someplace new. I wanted to do something fresh. I don't want it to just feel connected and also feel epic. I want it to feel like something you've never seen before. So right. So where we're headed with it, I'm hoping I'm ready for people to hate me. I'm ready for them to be mad. I'm ready for them to love it, hopefully, but I promise, like, I'm not taking this one lightly. I mean, I'll always say, like, Batman will always be my favorite character, and I love him since I was my kid's age. But Justice League is the book I've been dreaming of writing since I was even younger than that, because it's the heart and soul of the DCU. So, I've been at DC 10 years next year, and this is the one I feel like I've been training for a long time. So the plan, the scope, I want to do something akin to kind of the way Hickman wrote Avengers or wrote Fantastic Four, and have huge pieces and mechanics that come back and surprise you, where you're like, they planned that 2 years in advance? Well, we did, and it's going there. I can't believe they're going to the 6th dimension. What even is that? I know, Mixie Spitlick or Mixaplick is the 5th. What is that? All of that stuff. What's the 5th world? What's all of it? Like, we're going all of those things. So I want it to feel almost not too crazy, because it's, at the end of the day, what I'd say, if I could reiterate anything to people out there thinking of picking it up. I hope that my track record at this point shows, and, that I've never written a book that hasn't been very personal to me at DC, or an arc of a book. And this one is extremely personal. It's about what happens when you reach a moment when all the things you thought were givens fall apart. For these heroes, they thought the universe always was on a diagonal line of sort of progress and was evolving towards something wonderful, evolving towards something great. And their job was to kind of shepherd that destiny in by helping people be their best selves, despite these kind of impulses towards bad things. And the villains were the ones that were the aberrations, that were not, our nature isn't dark, our nature is good. And because of what they find in the totality, now that the source wall is broken and these hints they're getting, they start to worry that everything is the opposite. What if human nature is actually not only dark, but was meant to be something even darker that they're starting to discover? What if the universe was designed not as something beautiful, but as a weapon? And what if they're the outliers in that way? What do you do as a Justice League when you realize maybe you're the bad guys of the universe's story? Do you still keep doing what you're doing and be heroes, even if you're pushing a boulder up this hill that you didn't know was there, or not? So it's very much about, to me, this moment. It's not this moment like in a political way. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more a moment when I think the challenges that we all face, globally, but all of it, just on a personal level, sometimes feel insurmountable and huge, particularly now when we're all kind of entrenched in our own areas and feel like discourse is very difficult to kind of achieve. And the heroes are the ones that are saying we need to get together and figure this out. And the villains are the ones saying, no, we're the heroes, because nobody wants to get together. Yeah. They've never wanted that. Everybody wants to get their own. And if we actually accept that and embrace our nature, embrace doom, and in its original form, doom, the word doom meant fate. It didn't have this menacing connotation. That's why Luthor loves it. He's like, our doom is to be bad guys. That's what we're supposed to be, built into the fiber of our being. We're animals. We're not meant to be this. This is like a derailment. All this stuff about building civilization and being a community and all of that, that's like the tail that we need to lose to go back to what we're supposed to be. You'll never guess what we'll achieve if we just sort of, I've seen the future, says Luthor, and if we just forget being so good in a phony way, we'll become the most best version of ourselves possible. So he's kind of like, be your best self, embrace your inner villain. And
we just saw his future view when he went to issue 5. He went over to see what happened.
Right. And he sees it. And then it gets even crazier later when you see when they get to the 6th dimension and you see sort of all the different paths things could go on and sort of what he sees the most likely versions are. And John Jones sees that too. So anyway, not to ramble, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the book is very personal to me. It's very much about what I think these heroes offer us, even when they're just fictional characters at times of tremendous uncertainty and tremendous challenge. And I love them for that. So I've never had as much fun writing Metal and now writing this. It's been the best stretch I've ever had in superhero comics. I adore it. So, those are the kind of 3 big tenets for me, given that it's a personal book from Go, that it's, connective, that it's epic, and that it feels fresh and daring. So
it definitely does. It definitely stands out.
Thanks.
Thanks. I've just been a huge fan of it since you started it. I like told you, I read all the way through Metal. I was a big advocate. Like, Metal's amazing. It's awesome. And then you went into No Justice, and then we went over to this. It's been so good. So I'm going to ask you a couple spoilers questions. So
yeah, let's do it. DC isn't here, right? I'm in my backyard. My kids
you don't know that they got the DC sniper looking at you right now.
I know you'll just see the hook and it'll like pull me out. One of my kids came home from camp early, which is why I'm like hiding in the blazing sun in the backyard. So forgive me for I'm like sweating my head off under this tree, but DC is not here. Yeah, DC's not here, so let's spoil away. Let's spoil everything.
Okay, well, the first big one. Okay, 2 of my favorite superheroes. It's always been Green Lantern, Flash, Batman. So you introduce the ultraviolet lantern on Green Lantern. There's been so many questions. Is it going to affect the new Green Lantern run coming out? What are you doing with it? Is it going to be a big spectrum? Is this your version of Jeff Johns introducing the emotional spectrum, and you're going to play with it all, or what can you tell me?
Well, I can tell you it plays a continuing part in our run in the way that Sinestro now wields that power, and he will continue to wield that power throughout Justice League. In terms of Grant's run, I don't want to give away too much because Grant, like I was saying, I've become quite close with, and in fact, I ran all of our Justice League stuff by him right before we started. And the best part was, this is a total spoiler, I shouldn't say, but at the end of there's a big Justice Doom war coming at some point in our story, and it's a culmination of a lot of threads that come together. It'll happen in 2019. And at the end of that, the heroes and the villains sort of find themselves, hurtling through the void in the multiverse, and it kind of reaches a certain place. And I'm talking to Grant about this, and I'm like, so the multiverse sails across the void. We hit this distant shore. The heroes and the villains are there. And I was about to tell him what really happens. And he was like, wait. He was like, Scott, he was like, I'll tell you what happens. He was like, I have the best ending for you possible. And I can't do
I like the accent.
It sounds Jamaican when I do it. It's meant to be Scottish. I apologize. I won't even attempt it anymore. But he was like, you know what's there? He was like, so you get there, the door opens, and on the other side of the void is Marvel. And I was like, thank you, Grant. That's great. And he was like, no, just imagine it. It's like the door opens and you hear snicked. And he's like, then you just mic drop and you're out. And I was like, if only there weren't like a million hurdles to doing that, that would be a lot of fun. But no,
that was every fan's theory, by the way.
Well,
the other side of they're all like, it's Marvel. It's over there. We know it is.
I'll tell you, I would say this to fans, like, keep arguing for it and maybe it will happen. And then I'll be like, oh, that was always the plan, but it's that would be wonderful. And we have a lot of friends over there. But what I'd say, going back to your question, is that Grant has really amazing plans for Hal. And he told me these about a year ago when we were talking about Metal. So one of the reasons that we've kind of kept Hal a little bit off to the left with Justice League maintaining the source wall, and we're going to address that in January. We're going to do a big annual for Justice League where we address like what the 7 forces are that the villains are after, what happened with the source wall, the heroes attempt to fix it. It brings back the Omega Titans from No Justice, we realized, I'm spoiling everything now, but we realized that the Omega Titans were actually the kind of universe's alarm system for when the wall breaks. So they have to revive the Titan that died so that they can put it back together and plug the hole in the wall and see if that works. And if it doesn't work, things become really, really dire. So you can probably guess whether it works or it doesn't work. But all of the stuff that Grant has planned for Hal was done in coordination with this. So he has a really amazing story. I could tell you like a lot about it, but I wouldn't want to even come close to spoiling anything because I want you to pick it up and read it. But it's an incredibly fresh take. It's totally different than anything that was done before by Jeff or Rob Venditti or anybody. It really is incredibly unique and a completely new take about space cops and all of that kind of thing. So I would just say, you know, I know he really loved the concept and their plans for it in some ways, but I don't want to go into his stuff. But I can tell you that it's a continued thread in our book where Sinestro wields that power as ferociously as he can throughout. Every one of the villains, like, they kind of gain a new power as you go. So Grodd continues to be able to use the Still Force and enhance his powers through that. Next arc is about Aquaman and Wonder Woman. We just announced it, so it's called Drowned Earth. Francis Manapul is doing it. It starts in November, and it deals with dark forces that affect both divinity and magic. So Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Black Manta and Cheetah are the big antagonists of that arc. So once we get past the totality too, one of the things I'd say is I wanted in the first arc to kind of give you everything all at once. All the characters, all the villains, the scope of it, the ambition of it, for better or worse, just be like, this is how crazy and big and personal and fun we're going. After this arc, we start to narrow it down a bit. So each arc really focuses on two characters in particular. And some of the characters won't play a part in each arc. So spoilers. Next arc,
you're going to keep Batman all the time, though, right? You got to keep Batman.
Batman, actually, something happens to. Well, I'm going to spoil this too. Batman actually this week, Batman. Lex Luthor breaks Batman's arms and legs using the power of the totality just to prove how small he is. And so Batman winds up in a full body cast for a little bit, which is...
What?
Yes, I know, but it's a bat body cast. It's pretty awesome.
Okay, so, it's Batman style. We don't just get like an image of him in bed, legs up in the air, and Alfred just kind of being like...
There is actually, he's in a bat body cast pretty quickly, and it looks really intimidating. It looks like almost a bat sarcophagus, like with arms out and whatever. It's really, it's pretty awesome. I love it. He's still pretty tough. I mean, Batman, and there might be a scene coming up where he has to fight off a lot of villains while he's in a full body cast, which might be one of my favorite scenes that I ever got to write. So that might happen in issue 12, but
might not, right? You don't want to give like total spoiler,
right? Or it might not. I might just be bull. I don't know. I won't curse, but yeah, I might just be pulling your leg. But I think part of the fun, I dealt with Batman for 6-7 years, and I'm dealing with him both with the book I'm doing with Greg Capullo in a very, very serious way, and in Batman Who Laughs in a very dark and serious way as well. So there's an arc coming. There's a moment when he and really Martian Manhunter and Luthor face off on an alien planet. It's almost like a Western issue where the two of them finally kind of come face to face to sort of say to each other, listen, this is what we've discovered is inside that totality and what the universe wants to be, and we have to decide if we're really going to allow that or fight it, or can we combine forces or what. And Batman comes into that story. He kind of follows Martian Manhunter there, and he comes into that story in a really serious way. And there's a lot of heart to who he is in Justice League, but I also really enjoy playing him for comedic relief sometimes. So I've never gotten to do that. I mean, we tried to keep him funny in Batman. He has some of my favorite lines where he's like, "Who died made you Batman, Jim Gordon," in Super Happy Again. Those things. But overall, we really took him very seriously in Batman and who he was. And I still do, but because it's a team book, I can also play him as the guy who they all imitate his voice. You know what I mean? And
I loved that line. Everyone trying to make the Batman voice. That was one of my favorite parts. Like, I'm going to love this book.
It comes back. Well, it comes back. You'll hear Superman's actual impression in 7, and everybody's like, "Oh, damn." And then Batman gets to do it himself at the end of that issue, too, which is my favorite moment, where he's like, "This is how I sound." And then he gives the most Batman line I could ever write. And then they're all like, that's the best Batman voice. And everybody is just Batman because, of course, it is, right?
Right.
So no, it's tremendous fun writing him, and you know, he's in every arc, but he's also, I think I wanted him to play a bit more of a backseat, you know, both because I've written him so prominently for so long, and also because he's always been one of the leaders of the Justice League, and I think sitting back a little bit and giving John some room to breathe, it's an interesting character move for him, and I like why he's doing it in this one. He honestly, his biggest fear in Justice League is that he's just a street detective. You know, Metal scared him, and that comes back into this because the Batman Who Laughs comes back, and the Dark Knights come back, and we go back to the Dark Multiverse. Spoiler later in in Justice League. So yeah, I'm spoiling everything. But the
well, speaking of the Dark Knights and the Dark Multiverse, are we going to see my personal favorite was Red Death?
Yes. Red Death is coming back in the DCU. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it, but he will be coming back.
If you're not allowed, we can cut it out. But he's my favorite one out of all of them. And his turn, my only complaint about his turn was that you put it in a spin-off as opposed to the main line. And I was like, I felt like that had to be in the main book line. Like, why was that in a spin-off?
I know. Well, it was also like doing an event was like a crazy experience where, you know, I had never done anything like that, where there were so many moving pieces and there was so much pressure. I mean, when you pitch something like that, dude, you have to go out there and pitch it in front of like the corporate, you know. Oh,
I can imagine. Audience. Everyone has to hear it.
So you're like on a stage with a PowerPoint and you're like, this is why this is going to be successful. When a Batman rides a Joker dragon towards the face of, and like there's people in suits just looking at you like you're totally on drugs, and, you know. So that's how new it was to me. So I couldn't be prouder of Metal and what Greg and I did with that and how much fun we had.
It was an incredible story. I loved it.
Thanks.
That was my only complaint, was that the Red Death moment wasn't in the main story. It felt so important.
No, and what I'd say is this: like this ties into what we're talking about Justice League, right? That was a big learning experience for me, because when I pitched Metal at the very beginning, DC was hesitant because, you know, I hadn't been on Batman for a little bit. I had been doing All-Star, and they wanted me to do an event, but what I was pitching was big. I mean, it was like, you know, dealing with all this stuff from Sandman to the Anti-Monitor to, you know, and I think it was a little bit wilder than they had expected, and so there was a bit of resistance at first, and Greg and I really had to be like, no, look, give us a shot. Let us do this. I promise this is personal to us, and it's what we want to do. And they were great about coming around, but, you know, a lot of it was let's make it as small and as tight as possible at the beginning, in case people just are like, what the hell is this thing? We don't want to read it.
Right.
So I knew we had like 6 issues to do it, and then a couple interstitial issues and a couple tie-ins. And once it started going, everybody felt the same way at DC as we did, which was, I wish we had done even more, because there were so many parts of that story that I would have loved to even do more with, especially Red Death. But there was a whole arc with another with the 53rd world that bubbles up out of the thing, and there were a million things. There was like a lot of stuff we didn't get to do that I don't think the story suffered for it, but it would have been a lot of fun. So with Justice League, having all this room and knowing where we're going and knowing that it's one continuous story that builds on Metal, I know where I'm headed in terms of, I didn't get to do these things or use these characters. Well, this part goes in the Batman Who Laughs. Well, this part will go in the annual in this. This part will go into Last Night with Capullo. This part will go into the big finale and the story that we're building towards in 2019 when we sort of culminate everything in something big. So, you know, I have... It's all just this learning curve. I mean, I'm telling you, like, I never thought I would get to do what I'm doing now. I mean, if you told me 10 years ago I would get to have every character, you know, in the sandbox that I'm playing with, like this with Justice League, or that I get to do an event for DC, I would never have believed you. So I still feel young. Like, I mean, I know I'm not in life. I feel very old in life. But as a writer, it's all just one new experience after another, and it's so invigorating. I mean, I'm very grateful to DC for giving me all these different chances to try completely different muscles at once. Like right now, for example, I'm writing Justice League, which is as big and bombastic and kind of bright, but dark, but also just, you know, superhero as can be.
Yeah.
And then on the side, I'm writing the book with Greg Capullo, which is really experimental. It's sort of imagines our Batman 25 years out. What happened to him? I'm really excited about that book, but it's very different. It's probing and strange, and and then Batman Who Laughs is pure horror. It's like going back to my roots and just doing like knockdown, drag out, scariest thing I could possibly write that way. And so I have so many different things that I get to do right now. It's just such a joy. It's like almost like you get totally different muscles you get to flex on each project. So
right. I mean, I love your horror writing, and I'm excited that new Batman book you have coming out. I will say the DC metal being nice and concise was actually really good as a comic book reader who reads a lot of comic books. Marvel doing so many sprawling events that constantly get extra issues added on and things like that. Going into DC, I was like toting the DC metal is how it should be run. Like you have an issue and you have a tie-in. You have an issue and you have a tie-in. Like we shouldn't have 10 issues every week. Nobody can afford to buy all that on a regular basis. So I actually liked the way you guys did it, but I do wish you had more space towards the back end because it felt like we had just have single issues. It was so great in the beginning. I was getting everything, and
I know.
Singles.
I know. I wish we had more of an ecosystem, but I would say that like one thing I hope comes through is that we try to be very aware of, as creators as well. I think DC has been very good about it the last few years, especially. But me as a creator and Greg and a lot of us right now are just very, very concerned with making sure you guys get your money's worth with how expensive comics have gotten. So, with Justice League, I would rather err on the side of too much at once than err on the side of decompression and err on the side of, anything kind of drawn out or being too dragged out over time. I think about how much money. I mean, because I've been broke, dude. I'm a writer. I mean, I didn't grow up. You know what I mean? Like there were some lean years in there where there's a lot of borrowing money from parents and tutoring rich kids and all that kind of stuff. So, I think about my habit at that time and how hard it was to maintain, and it was less expensive than it is now. So we definitely want you guys to always to feel like we're giving you more than you paid for, issue to issue, story to story, arc to arc, event to event. So it's definitely a mission, like a mission statement from us, like me and James and Josh, the people building the Justice League group stuff, 100%.
Okay, speaking of, I'm assuming Joshua Williamson.
Yeah, Josh Williamson.
You have the Still Force. That was the other question I wanted to ask. I had to ask you about Batman, Green Lantern, and the Still Force, and then I wanted to talk to you about that Batman book you have coming out, but. The Still Force. Joshua Williamson's also doing the Strength Force and the Sage Force at the exact same time. Do you guys have a plan for how that plays out? How is Barry dealing with the Still Force and the Strength Force all at the exact same time, and how that is all coming together? Like, I'm assuming you do based on your reaction to the Green Lantern question. But
yeah, I would love to tease you guys and be like, wait, what's the Strength Force? Like what? But actually, Josh, I don't know if this is like relevant at all to, people out there, but a lot of us go pretty far back. I mean, you imagine whatever industry you're in, when you're trying to break in, you meet people along the way, and then you stay close. And Josh is one of the people that I met when I was pitching American Vampire, like when I was brand new. And he was pitching DC as well on a bunch of stuff that eventually came out in different forms. So he's a friend for over a decade. I've seen him married and have kids, and he's seen me have kids. So I talk to him every day, multiple times. Him and James are my two closest collaborators. James Tynan, who I've known equally as long, even longer. And so when it comes to sort of collaborating on things like the Still Force is something I pitched for Justice League again about a year ago when we were talking about metal stuff. And he said, I have this idea for splitting the Speed Force into these multiple things and have Barry discover how much about the Speed Force he never understood, and to have that be a major story arc that he's doing. So all of that, what he's introducing, and I don't know what's been announced yet. I don't remember what's been announced from his run, so I don't want to spoil anything. But what I can say is,
that's fine. I try not to leave solicits myself, so I kind of see them as they're coming out.
Yeah, it's just, all I can tell you is it becomes a major plot thread he's picking up, not just with the Still Force, but with everything he's introducing as one big sort of arc where Barry realizes he barely knew anything about sort of the energy that he's been drawing from for his whole superhero career.
Okay. I mean, that's awesome. Because I remember when you first did the Still Force, at the same time he was talking about the strength in the Sage Force, I was like, I'm pretty sure this is all one big thing. Like, otherwise, that is the most convenient coincidence ever.
No. It's all one big thing. It all comes from the idea that what we're trying to do is, when we did the break in the source wall, there was a lot of pressure from DC in some ways to be like, okay, and now the giant monster on the other side of the wall comes to get us. And it was like, really? Because that just makes the other side of the wall something that's, just more of the same, just who's the Galactus that's coming to eat us or whatever,
right.
And not that stuff won't happen, but what I was more interested in, and I think what all of us were more interested in, is what if the wall, like what's on the other side, is toxic and unknowable and unquantifiable right now. So it's almost like you're on a life raft on the ocean, on a toxic ocean, and the life raft has like sprung a leak, and you're going like, what do you do here? And how does that affect the lives here on the raft? And so we were very much more interested in kind of like that break in the wall, releasing things that cause even more conflict, even more discovery, even more wonder, once the rules of, that were always kind of governed by that boundary are destroyed. So, now that the wall is broken, the laws of physics start to break down, the rules of magic, the Speed Force, the multiversal kind of architecture, all of it begins to kind of, entropically dissipate. So all these new things start appearing, things that are almost like, well, when the Speed Force was formed, it had these other components, and then one became dominant, not to make too much of a spoiler. But so those other things, now that the sort of, the governing bodies of the universe, now that thing that kind of governs everything is broken, those other things are free to sort of come up and compete. So that's kind of how we're thinking about each character's mythology in a way where, it's almost like with Wonder Woman, magic has been one thing. And what James Tynion is exploring in Justice League Dark is this notion that because of what happened in No Justice and Metal and the source wall breaking, all of a sudden this entire well of other magical forces and ancient forces that sort of spawn magic are free to come back and try and repossess it. So all of that stuff is sort of part of the same big story, the same way the Still Force, the Sage Force, the Strength Force is one thing. So I can promise you, like, we might fall on our faces in terms of the storytelling. I hope we don't. But, and I've never been as like confident about a plan as the one we have through 2019 in terms of superhero stuff. Like I love it. So, but
so far it's been incredible across the board. The Flash has been great with this. We just had the Strength Force reveal itself, and Justice League Dark. I loved that first issue. I didn't know what to expect going into that.
Wait till you see it just gets better and better. Wait till you see. It's crazy. He has plans for every magical character. This is the book that James has been waiting to write since we started at DC. He actually, not to get too inside the Beltway, but he pitched the Justice League Dark book 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
In a way that I thought it was great, but it just wasn't the right time for it. Because there was a lot of talk about the Justice League Dark movie, and so there was a lot of there was just a lot of kind of resistance to the idea of doing a Justice League Dark that might not mirror exactly what was being proposed as the movie or TV stuff or whatever. So it was harder to get off the ground. So this is just by way of saying this isn't that book. This is different. But his love of these characters and his desire to write this book has been there since as long as I've known him. And I think that's obvious from the other things he writes. So, and the thing I was going to say is, like, we might all fall on our faces, telling this story. But the one thing I can promise people, because I know you're out there and you're like, do these guys have any effing plan? Is this just like all, like, how does continuity work? Like, do they talk? Like, what is Grant going to do? What about Kelly Sue coming in on Aquaman? Do they have any idea what she's going to do? And the one thing I can tell you is like 100% yes. Like, we might flub it. I might totally screw this to F up and be like, oh God, the whole multiverse is broken. But it won't be for lack of planning, and it won't be for lack of coordination. Like that stuff we take very seriously. I mean, and I will say, like, we mess up. Like, sometimes I get questions all day long on Twitter. I mean, a lot of people don't see it because I respond. I have open DMs, so I respond a lot in DM to things that are continuity-based questions because I don't want to litigate like stuff in public that's like, why is this version of Cassandra Cain? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've actually answered me a few times. Like, I'll tweet out a question and you'll be the one that respond. And I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah, well, I love getting into conversations in direct message. I just hate litigating it in public because I have enough followers at this point that it becomes like this cacophonous thing.
Yeah.
But you know, we'll mess things up where like, you know, someone will set something up and somebody else is supposed to take that ball and run with it, and because of schedule or because of a book getting canceled or because of a new artist or someone coming on, we drop the ball, and a story thread that was supposed to be bigger than it isn't, or you know, something happens with a character in continuity and that continuity gets changed internally, and then we adapt to the change, and then they never announced that was changed, so then we look like we just changed continuity. And those are all just part of the, you know, that's just the hazards of the job, and it falls on us. Like if we mess that up or I screw that up ever, I'm perfectly willing to take the hit and say I'm sorry. But the thing I just want to like emphasize is that continuity, collaboration, the DC universe feeling like a tapestry that is planned and that is a coordinated singular story in some ways is extremely important to us, because it's one of the things that we loved, all of us growing up with comics, was that feeling that when you enter the DC universe, it's one story being told. Even if it's multiple stories and they never touch each other or whatever, they still feel organically part of one universe, where you might see Green Arrow come through Justice League and that won't conflict with what's happening in Green Arrow, or something happening over in Batgirl might get mentioned by Batman and Justice League in a way that you're like, oh yeah, you know, because you know, that's one of the things that I think the comics has that other things don't have, you know, like you see it now building out of comic movie stuff and comic TV stuff, where Infinity War did it geniusly, where I felt like, you know, they built it over 10, 15 years where you see all these Easter eggs. But so often, like, you know, TV, movies, they don't have that advantage that we have. It's one of the things that I think is so wonderful about comics is that it's immersive, you know. When you follow one superhero book, you can find your way to another. And if they're confluent, it's a double reward. So we take it very, very seriously. Apologies for any mistakes we make, but I can tell you, like, in terms of the story we're telling between now and 2020, in Justice League Group, in coordination with what Brian is doing on Superman, Brian Bendis, and what Tom, who's one of my closest friends, is doing on Batman, you know, there is no discord about like, oh, I don't know what's happening there. Or I don't know what Kelly Sue is doing on Aquaman. I don't know what Willow is doing on what we all know what each other is doing.
Right.
And I'm setting up Kelly Sue and Aquaman and Drowned Earth, and we're all trying to work very hard to make sure that you guys feel like it's one well-oiled machine of story that you enjoy.
That actually leads to a question, because we have quite a few questions that I pulled off of Twitter. And one of the biggest ones we've been asked is, how do you feel about Brian Michael Bendis coming over to DC? Because he's kind of known for writing his own continuity for things, ignoring to an extent. I mean, it comes back around sometimes. Sometimes he fixes it. Sometimes he doesn't. I'm a fan of him, but it's a little, I would say, unnerving to see his style for Marvel coming over to DC. It is, because like he works over there, but does he work here? What can you say about what's going on with Brian Michael Bendis?
I just hate him. I hate him on everything. No, Brian, it's funny because I remember when they told me.
Real quick, because I don't know if you're tracking this. So recently, because of the Doomsday Clock delays, Man of Steel #2 came out. In the back end of it, it has what appears to be the artist had the information wrong and drew Wally instead of Barry. And
I'm
Brian
aware
Michael,
of this.
and he tweeted out that it's a Doomsday Clock spoiler. So it's that once again, everyone's now going, what is he doing? Is it in continuity? You know.
What I can tell you is like Brian is one of the most collaborative people like that I've ever met in comics.
Okay.
All he wants to do is collaborate, which is amazing. Like when he first, I remember when they told me he was coming over. We were at a summit. I was at a summit in Burbank in the DC offices are actually on like the movie lot in Burbank on the Warner Brothers movie lot. So I still, as a kid, still get a thrill going in and seeing the water tower with the WB and all that stuff on it. But I was there for a summit, and I was out to dinner with a couple writers, with Josh and James and a couple people. And Dan DiDio came like running in, and he was like, I have to tell you something. I was like, what is it? You know, I was like, DC is going bankrupt. We're fired. We're all fired. You know, like what is it? Like, we're all getting a raise, you know, like we've been purchased by Disney, you know, Marvel DC crossover, but like Grant predicted in his chaos magic genius. He was like, no, he pulled me aside. He's like, Brian Bendis is coming over. And, you know, how do you feel about this? And I was like, this is the best thing. Because Brian and I had become friends about a year before over personal stuff. This is to give you, again, like not to get too whatever, but this is who Brian is to me. Like I had a question that really related to parenting. It was something that I knew he was very sort of familiar with and good about. I knew from, his friends and mutual friends and all of this. And I wanted his advice, and it was personal advice. And so I wrote him out of the blue. I'd never really known him. And I was like, Brian, I know we don't know each other, but I have a question for you, and it's kind of personal. Do you mind if we hop on the phone, whatever? And he called me that night. And it was like, pick up. Hey, it's Brian. Is this Scott? I was like, yeah. I won't do my. It was the same accent for everybody. It doesn't sound right.
They're all an attempt at Scottish.
Right. They're all just like a failed attempt. But I told him what it was about, and he was like, well, I knew it was either about parenting or you just wanted Spider-Man. And the best part, we talked for 3 hours, and that's who he is. And I knew he had a million deadlines and a million things, and he's a good person. He's a good human being, and he's a really good collaborator. And he's somebody who, if you say to him, listen, please don't do this, I need this, he listens. Not that hasn't happened with me, but he says all the time, if you need something, tell me and I'll change. I'll do this, I'll do that.
Right.
So all I can say about, what he's doing over here is just that he's been intensely accessible, intensely enthusiastic about collaborating. And he has huge plans for both Superman and what he's doing on Superman with Superman and subsidiary Superman stuff like Supergirl and Legion and all that kind of stuff. And then also for his own stuff, his imprint, and the stuff that he's doing there is really ambitious. So he's very busy, but he's very, very good about making the time for everybody to sort of talk to him about what he has planned. So I can't say enough good things about him as somebody at the company, and I know what his plans are over the next couple years, and he is a big aerial view planner, like a 30,000 foot out planner, where it is not like week by week. It is like, here is where I'm headed, the way we are on Justice League. And I can tell you, I think you guys will be really happy. I hope you are, because I know that he cares tremendously. He really does. I mean, he was when he came over, he kept texting me pictures of his what he had read that night, and it was just like the stacks of Superman books he committed himself to. And I'm like, I didn't even know that existed. It's like Superman 1950 whatever collection of 19. Right. He read everything,
all the classic stuff.
Not even just like totally obscure classic, stuff that you would never even be able to find. So he's very committed, and I think we're very happy to have him over. And I think he's going to be a great addition. And I know it sounds really hokey, and I sound like a Pollyanna. I'm not. I promise. I'm not a shill for DC. I've had a lot of big fights, with them at times. And when I started, I had a bad internal relationship with them, because I was always it was a different time, and there was less freedom, and I was always going in there and fighting over things and yelling and.
Right.
So I'm not out here to be like, DC is so amazing all the time. But what I can tell you is, at this moment in time, we really do enjoy each other's company. I like Brian, and I admire him, and we're friends. And Tom and I know Tom from before he started on Grayson, from when he was doing books, like books, and Josh and James, like I said, we go all the way back. And, I know Willow when she was doing Air and all that stuff in Vertigo, when I met her back then. So the people at DC, and Kelly Sue, I know from when I started at Image from forever ago, hanging out at a couple of those Image expos and shooting the shit. So, there is nobody in this thing right now that we don't actually enjoy getting on the phone and saying, hey, what are you doing? Can I show you what I'm doing? Can we make sure it works and that stuff? So it's a really good time. Honestly, anyone out there, that's wondering about it, I'm telling you the truth. That is not it's a good moment to be a DC fan, even if just for the spirit among the creators. So yeah. I hope that shows.
No, it definitely does. Everyone's freaking out about him coming over, and I'm just kind of well, let's see what happens. You can't judge a guy who's changing superheroes entirely to go to Superman. It's not like he picked somebody from the backwoods of DC that no one's ever heard of, and it's Superman. So you gotta see how it plays out. You gotta see what's gonna happen with the whole thing. Well, that's what I keep telling everyone.
Yeah, he has a long form plan. He is not an immediate plan guy. He is. I mean, he has a plan for these issues. but he has like the long-reaching plan, you know.
Yeah.
And that
Well, we've seen that in his runs in Marvel, the ones that are like
Yeah.
50 issues deeper. Ultimate Spider-Man's always a great example because it's like 150 till we get to like the where everything comes back around.
I just read that with my son. We're about halfway through right now, and he's loving it. And I keep telling him, I'm like, wait till you see what's coming. Wait till you see what's coming. Wait till you see what's coming. And that's who Brian is. And, you know, I think he's confident enough that it's not take it or leave it, but it's that I hope that readers have confidence in him at this point to say, this is a guy who clearly always has a big plan, has a plan here, and it pays off over time.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what he's doing here with Superman. I think you guys are going to be really happy. I hope you are. You know,
I mean, I hope we are. I can't say much. I've only read up to issue 2 right now. But okay, last question, and then we're going to go through some of these Twitter questions because we've been talking already for a while. You've revealed so much stuff. This is incredible. And thank you so much for everything you've done. But
we got to do this more often, dude. It's a pleasure. I love this. I'm like, this is a whole new world to me. I'm always
just
like
getting to the chat and not have to worry about things, I guess.
Yeah, I'm like, I always have. Whenever I do a DC interview, they're always on the phone with me, you know, and like I have to. Now I'm like in my yard. I can talk to you about anything. You know, we should have a beer. I could be like, hey, you know, just spoil more stuff. Just go into it.
Let's do like beers with Scott Snyder. That'll be the series. We'll make it into a series every week. You just come over here.
I would happly make time for that. And
okay, well at this point we've been talking for a while. This has been incredible. I'm trying not to like cut it down at all, but we're
yeah. I'm sorry. Am I talking too much?
No, you are perfectly fine. Trust me. Not You have been so amazing at this whole thing, just revealing so many things. So it's been awesome. It really has. But I do want to get to the Twitter questions because I didn't want to ask them to give us questions and then come over here. Before we get into them, so we're going to try to keep these answers short, okay? Because I'm going to skip through the ones that are quite obviously going to be like a huge question to answer. But I do want to ask one thing myself before we move forward. With the source wall broken, are you going to be touching on Superboy Prime?
All I can say about that is that Superboy Prime has a lot of things coming about him in 2018 into 2019.
Okay.
I don't want to give away where they're going to be and what's going to happen.
And that's fine. Just I've been asked that question so many times. They're like, the source wall's broken. Where is he? I'm like, I don't know.
That 100%. That and Darkseid's father are both a big part of, because he was in the wall as well. They're a big part of stories happening. I don't want to say if they're in Justice League or other books or what. But Superboy Prime has a big role next year, as does Kyle Rayner's experience with the source wall and all that stuff. So they'll, my
actual assumption was that because Superboy Prime's history is so entrenched in like classic DC, I kind of thought he was just going to vanish. Like we're just not going to deal with him anymore.
No. It's definitely something that was a big part of our last sort of set of discussions. So
okay, all right. So I'm going to try to go through these. So right at the beginning we have Will 6198334 is asking you, what is your favorite Bat Family member?
Other than Batman?
Other than Batman.
Oh man, that's so hard. I mean, I would have to say Dick Grayson, other than Alfred. I mean, Alfred is my second favorite, but out of the children, Dick Grayson. I mean, I wrote him for a year plus. I love him because he's the heart of the family. He's so compassionate. And I remember when I was writing Black Mirror, it was always like everybody would always ask for shirtless shots or butt shots of him. And I was always like, this is a very serious story. I don't know what you're talking about. Right. And then by the end, I totally gave in. And I was like, Jock, all right, he's detecting this without a shirt or whatever. Like, you know, and everybody loved it. So he's a lot of fun. I love all of them. And Damian has actually grown a ton on me. I will admit this too. Sorry, I know super short questions, but
oh no, you're fine. You're fine. I'll just cut down some of the questions.
I get asked a lot why I didn't write Damian more while I was doing Batman, and the two reasons are: one, because he was being written in Batman and Robin. I was asked not to write him a lot because that was the whole premise of Pete's great Batman and Robin run.
Right.
But secondarily, my son is also, you know, young, and I had a lot of trouble relating to Damian as a choice that Batman would allow. Because having my son be that age and imagine him getting punched in the face by adults around me, I couldn't write it. Yeah. And now that I've come to understand Damian differently, and I love writing him, so he's high up there on my list as well. I couldn't get past my own family relationship with it at first, but I enjoy him quite a bit.
As much as I love Batman, I've always said he's pretty much a bad dad if he's letting his son come out and fight crime like that.
It's there's questionable.
Yeah, questionable decisions.
Yes.
You know. At Mike Oxlong 3345 says, do you have any plans of using more obscure characters on the Justice League?
Yeah. I mean, there's some I don't know how obscure these are, but you'll see like Firestorm, Adam Strange, Vixen, all those characters come into the next number of issues. I don't want to spoil who shows up. People show up in issue 7 that are
Okay.
more obscure, and then yeah, we got Red Tornado, other characters that are coming back from Metal, and yeah, you'll see. Yes, Justice League is very much about being connective and sort of all embracing. So part of the mission statement is to be like, you'll see Mr. Terrific in the Med Lab, and you'll see the Atom, and you'll see all those characters are in this arc and the next arc in different capacities. So we want you to feel like you never know who might pop up. So I'm definitely going to be using more obscure characters in minor and major roles.
Okay, awesome. X Elite 3 Assassin 9 wants to know if there's any artists you want to work with that you have not.
Oh, there's so many. Oh my God. I think a couple that I'll tell you I've been
asking questions that can't be short, aren't I?
No. I'll answer quickly. But
no. I'm just saying, like, I just find it funny. It's like these are not quick shotgun style questions.
The ones. I mean, Frank Quitely is way at the top. I've met him a few times, and I would kill to work with him. Olivier Coipel, we're friends, and we keep almost working together on stuff, and the schedules just haven't matched up. Sarah Pichelli, I just love her stuff. Pichelli, and Nicola Scott is another one that we keep kind of going back and forth. So there are a ton. I mean, there's just too many to name. Art Adams, and there are people that are like kid dreams, and then there are also people now that I would kill to work with all over the place. Assad Ribic, so but hopefully we'll see.
I mean, that's really awesome to hear, because I don't know. I can't turn these questions into much longer with my own answer. So I'm going to combine two of them. We got Reese at Reese M230, and we also got at Gallifrey Nina. He's asking if you would be willing to do a Legion of Doom comic soon, and she's asking, could we expect a Hawkwoman, Hawkgirl series soon?
Yeah, well, the Legion of Doom, what we're doing now is if you love Legion of Doom, and you buy those issues and they don't dip on the Legion of Doom issues, you'll get a Legion of Doom series. Like right now, every 4 or 5 issues of Justice League is a Legion of Doom issue. So you'll see the numbering kind of crossed out cosmetically on the cover as a joke, and it says Legion of Doom takes over, and it'll focus on the villains of that arc. So the first one was really about Luthor, touched on Grodd and Sinestro a little bit. The next one is about Manta and Cheetah and Joker a little bit. So the more you support the book on those issues, the more heat there is for a full-blown series, which I know, I would love to write. James Tynan, who's, again, writing those issues, would love to write. So, yeah, please pick him up. And Hawkgirl, again, all I'd say is Hawkgirl, as you'll see, this issue that comes out this week shows she has a connection to the totality and the history of this whole thing that I'm going to give you more spoilers, but it has, like, a bigger scope than she ever knew. There might even be a design to why she was reincarnated the way she was over those years, why she suddenly has, nth metal wings, whereas, Carter has a different sort of background. All this is being done in total coordination with Rob Venditti, by the way, who's, again, like one of the greatest guys. Southern gentleman, moonshine.
Oh, I've met him. He's great.
He's a moonshine on the porch, like Southern gentleman, amazing dude. And we get along great. I love what he's doing with Hawkman. But, if you like what we're doing with Hawkgirl, and she plays a bigger and bigger role, because a lot of the mystery is, what is her connection? Why is she capable of communicating with the totality when almost no other character is? Why are these Source Wall beings, from the Source Wall seeming to react to her? Is there a history that goes even further back than the origins of the universe? The more that you support that vocally, the more likely it is that they'll give someone the job to do a Hawkgirl, Hawkwoman issue. But you also will see Hawkwoman in Justice League coming up. So that
was actually a question I had, because is it Hawkgirl or Hawkwoman you're using? Because her history is almost as confusing as Hawkman's.
It is. They're probably voted the most confusing histories in all of comics are like the Hawks. And I love, how you make sense of it, and then you're like, oh wait, there's 5 things that don't make any sense.
Exactly. So, yeah.
But I love that about them. I mean, I love the fact that they're, archaeologists with this strange mystery about them, because that just fits. Like, archaeology is about constantly seeking for truths that you're never going to fully uncover, and that's part of what they are. And I love that that's sort of built into their core DNA. But we're gonna go with what Rob pitched for how Hawkwoman and Hawkgirl relate, and sort of what he's building. So Hawkwoman is going to play a role in upcoming arc, issues 13, 14, and 15 of Justice League, with Hawkgirl as well.
Okay, awesome. At Blue Tongue, well, they're kind of an explicit thing for my channel here. So at Blue Tongue, we'll put it on the screen probably. First comic you've ever read.
Oh man, I honestly couldn't. I think the oldest comic I own that I remember reading is two things. It was Hulk versus Batman, that giant oversized. It was like the Olympics. Do you remember this? Where they like fought at the. It was the old Marvel ones that were like oversized like this. They had Spider-Man versus Superman, and they had it was like Hulk versus Batman, and it was the Joker, and it was the Shaper of Worlds. Do you remember this?
No, I don't remember that at all.
I think it was Jorge Garcia Lopez that drew it. It was amazing. It has like a Picasso Joker sequence. Yeah, it's Batman versus the Hulk, and it's like it's Batman versus the Hulk with Joker and the Shaper of World. It was like a series of 4 comics. It was Superman versus Spider-Man. It was Batman versus the Hulk, and it was like the Winter Olympics is attacked as well by I think it was, and the 3 of them I still have them, and I actually have crayon marks over them. I'll take a picture and send it to you. It's at my parents. They're at my parents' house, and they have a cabin in Pennsylvania, and it's out there. But I still own them. So those are probably my first, the oldest comics I own. They must have been when I was like 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old.
Gotcha. We got another question from tons of people. But the first one we found was at Luke Lambert 22. Everyone's asking you, do you have any plans for Connor Kent?
Oh, well, I can tell you there are big plans for Connor Kent, but they're not in Justice League. But they're elsewhere, and you can probably guess where they are. So, yes.
Not Superman at all, right?
I don't know. That would make no sense at all.
Yeah, that would make no sense at all.
No, there are very big plans for Connor and a lot of those characters. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, you've just pleased so many Connor Kent fans that are just obsessed with learning where he is.
It's the truth. There are plans for him.
Okay, so I just lost. Oh, there. At Grayson Red asks, will Nightwing ever interact or join the Justice League in your run?
Yeah, well, you see him. He has a big story coming between Batman and Nightwing, so I didn't really want to bring him in just because he's got a very big role over there.
Yeah.
But you will see him interact through Titans and through the Justice League once we get past these couple arcs. There's a role that he's going to play that has to do with sort of the Justice League expanding. Once they realize they're up against the Legion of Doom by issue 6.
Okay.
This week's issue with the Joker and all that. When they realize they really need to sort of draw everybody in is a couple arcs down the line, because it's not just the Legion of Doom, it's other forces as well. And Nightwing will play a part in that. All
right, awesome. I just lost. Oh yeah, I doubt you have an answer to these, but I'll ask it. At Jack Fernan 7, will White Lantern Kyle Rayner return? Also, where is Godspeed? I saw that. I'm like, you didn't write those.
Well, yeah, those are both out of my wheelhouse. But what I'd say is Kyle Rayner. It's in Grant's hands right now. So again, I don't want to go there. Godspeed, I know Josh has a lot of plans for. That's a character he worked really hard on, and he has a lot of love for. So you can ask Josh. I'll bet you if you ask him on Twitter, he'll tell you. But yes, that's not a character he designed to then throw away. Okay, I'll tell you that.
They're gonna make you pick a favorite here, but at Leon Miguel wants to know who your favorite Justice League animation voice actor is.
Oh, well, I mean, Kevin Conroy is always like up there, and I've met him. He's such a sweet guy. Tim Daly, I love for Superman. Susan Eisenberg. I mean, they're Bible. So yeah. I'd have to say all of them. Those 3,
That's not picking your favorite. That's the whole team.
Well, I guess when I was starting, and I went to one of my first cons, Kevin Conroy was there, and I told him I was just starting on Detective. And he was like, do you want to take a picture? And I was like, yes, I do. And he's like, do you want me to say it? I was like, yes, I do. And he was like, I am, vengeance. I am the night. I was like, I love you forever. So I'd have to pick Kevin.
Okay. So you have a reason though. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, no, you actually answered that, why you didn't use Damian during your Batman run. But that was asked by William
See, I get it a lot.
Yeah.
I get it a lot.
I imagine you do. I just assumed because you wanted to make Duke. That was my, he's working on Duke, so we're good. Yeah.
No, I didn't even, we were trying to build some stuff with Harper and other characters at that time. There were different priorities at different moments where DC might come to you and be like, we want to build a new young team, like, or new young, but the reason I didn't use Damian, really, I promise, was like he was the whole purpose of Batman and Robin was the exploration of that relationship, and that set that book apart. So for me to start bringing him in heavily would have stepped all over what Pete had planned, and Pete is, again, a very close friend, and I wouldn't do that to him. So, and I have my own reasons as well, but I'm telling you, that's why. There was no like nefarious reason where I was like I was trying to replace him. I mean, Grant really did all of us in the best way by making Damian his biological son. I mean, that it doesn't end Robin, but that's a lot of weight. Like Damian really has to graduate to something else before you create
can't
any
just be
new
swapped out kind of a situation.
You can't swap that character out. So there was no plan to like swap him out. It really was more like give him the room to breathe in another book because he's an important character.
If Batman and Nightwing, they said Bruce a dick, but had a fair fight, who would win? From at Amilaj, I can't pronounce that one. I'm sorry. But who would win?
I mean, I think Bruce might let Dick win, but I mean, he would. Like if he was being a good dad or like I like to think he would do that in some way.
Oh, you won again.
Yes, he'd be like, "Oh, look, I forgot to punch you." And then you get, but I mean, Batman. I always loved that. I mean, like I would say this, like whenever anyone asks me, like whoever wins in a fight, when it's like Hulk or Spider-Man, it's always like Batman wins. Batman wins in the fight when it's Avengers versus X-Men. You know what I mean? Because but I would say this, like the thing that I love about that is that deep down, like there's actually a deeply primal reason why Batman wins. He is the one that took a tragedy in his life and turned it into fuel to overcome anything. And even though it's comedic and humorous, where you're like, he always wins, the whole enduring lesson and why he's the most popular character is because it just teaches us that over and over. There's nothing you can't overcome. So him always winning is something that's sort of deeply on a deep nerve level, I think important in that way too, so I love that it's always Batman. So it would be hard to say that Dick would beat him, but I think he would let him. I think he'd let him. I'd like to think of it.
I would like to think so too. I mean, it's not like they just met. They've known each other forever. So okay, so you're from New York. This is gonna be a great one to ask you. At Too Broke wants to know, does pineapple belong in pizza?
Oh no, I definitely am against pineapple on pizza, as are my children. I'm trying to raise them right. So
raise them right. No pineapple on pizza. See, that's where we got to disagree. I kind of like pineapple on my pizza sometimes. I mean,
that's Colorado, dude. That's where you are. Whatever. New York, you can't do that.
You can't do that? No? Okay. We'll do this last one from Twitter at SShow815 because this is something we talked about prior. You can mention here. But when are you going to go back to Wytches?
Oh yeah. So Wytches, the next chapter comes out at the end of October. It's called The Bad Egg, and we published pieces of it in Image Plus, but we didn't publish the end. And we're publishing it as a relatively cheap volume for you guys. It's about a 70-page book for, I think it's like $5.99 or something. So it's, we tried to cut it as low as we could, possibly to give you a good deal. But it introduces a new character who is the son of a character from the first arc. And tells his story, and then in the subsequent arc, which we're going to work on as soon as we're halfway through The Batman Who Laughs, picks up with this character Sebastian, who's the one introduced in Bad Egg, and Sailor as a team. So it's building. It's sort of a bridge between Arc 1 and Arc 2, but it's really robust. I mean, it's a pretty big story that introduces a lot of things about this young character, Sebastian. He was born into the Irons, which is the group that hunts witches. If you don't read Wytches and you want to pick it up, basically it imagines that witches are not like the green skin, pointy hat things that we've seen in movies. They're actually like this evolutionary offshoot of man that dig these burrows under the ground and have these ancient forms of science where they grind up bones and all kinds of blood and stuff, and they can make tinctures that can heal things that nobody in modern medicine can. And they're cannibalistic and have like two eyes on one side of their head. Yeah. And so people worship them and pledge people to them. If you give them someone to eat, they'll give you something to cure whatever it is you want, like make someone fall in love with you or whatever, all through their weird science. So it's very much about human darkness, human evil, and Arc 1 came out a couple years ago. Arc 2 we have planned for right after Batman Who Laughs, and this is sort of Arc 1.5. So it's a big story. I'm really happy with it. I think it's one of the best things we've done, and it'll be out October.
All right, that's awesome. So what do you have coming out real soon, Scott?
Well, because I have like have so much time on my hands or whatever. I'm like hiding out in my lawn just because I can't even deal with being inside because there's so much work to look at. But and my child. But so right now I'm on Justice League. I hope you guys will give it a shot. Justice League Dark, and Justice League Odyssey, which Justice League Odyssey is starting soon, are sort of 3 books all about the biggest heroes. Justice League Dark is about magic and a team that's all magical and supernatural characters led by Wonder Woman. Justice League Odyssey is a space team led by Cyborg, Jessica Cruz, and Darkseid, weirdly enough. And Justice League itself is kind of the big 8 characters. It's Martian Manhunter, Hawkgirl, Superman, Batman, Flash, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern, John Stewart, and Cyborg as well. And it's sort of, again, it's everything I was saying earlier. It's a story about sort of the secret origin of the DC multiverse, its death, and its possible sort of salvation and remaking into something wildly different. So really, really excited. I get a lot of questions, by the way, if like we're planning on some kind of reboot or that stuff. We are not. None of the stuff we're talking about like the breaking of the multiverse or that is something where we're trying to head towards like rebirth too. It's a story that's very much about itself. It will have big effects all over the DCU in major ways. But that said, like, I want you to read it knowing that it's not a gimmick. It's personal, and it's about what these heroes mean to us. It's about them up against the biggest challenges we've ever pitted them against, honestly. And it's about this moment in time. So I really hope you'll pick it up. I'm also coming in November. I'm doing Batman Who Laughs, which is sort of Batman Who Laughs is a character we introduced in Metal. It imagines that if the Joker, Batman finally kills the Joker in this other dimension, because the series we did over the summer in Metal was about the dark multiverse where all of your hopes and fears live. So one of Batman's greatest fears, or his greatest fear, is that he'll kill the Joker, and inside the Joker's heart will be a toxin that makes whoever kills him the next Joker that's irreversible. And so this character is the Batman who's transformed by this toxin into a combination of the Batman and the Joker. He has all of the Joker's evil and all of Batman's strategic mind. So whereas the Joker is out to kind of always prove to Batman that the world is evil, the world is crazy, the Batman Who Laughs doesn't want to prove anything. He's just like the ultimate apex predator and thinks of like 100 different ways to kill you and just get anything that's a threat. So that series is a really big deal for us. I'm doing it with Jock from Wytches and from
his art's incredible.
Yeah, from Black Mirror, my very first Batman thing. It starts in November. It's a 6-issue series, and you could read it alone. It's very self-contained, and yet I will spoil this and say the things that it sets up are huge for what we're doing with Justice League, what's coming later in the year. So it is actually part of the same exact story, and you'll see him first appear in Justice League and that. So you can read them apart, but if you read them together, you'll see it's one part of one giant plan. I'm really, really excited about it. Joker's in it. It's nuts. And it's sort of my most dark, nightmarish thing I could do with Batman. It's sort of my, like, what are Batman's deepest fears? How do I bring those to life? And how do I make this something that feels like a living nightmare? So I'm really proud of it, honestly. I think it's one of the better things I've done. And then Wytches comes out around the same time, Wytches the Bad Egg. And then down the line, just like kicking it down, I have a book with Greg Capullo called Batman Last Night on Earth. And it's our final Batman story together, which is very hard to say. But, I'm sure we're always like the Rolling Stones. We're like, we won't be playing Satisfaction when we're 50. And then they're like 80 years old, so I'll be on Batman. I'm 90 with Greg. But no, we really want this to be the coda. This is about how our Batman ends, our version of Batman. And so it opens with Batman in Arkham. He wakes up suddenly and he's young. He's still in his 30s. And Alfred's there and he's like, thank God, sir, you've been here for 20 plus years, ever since you killed your parents in that alley. That's the opening. And it has Batman carrying around the Joker's head, which is still alive in a jar, and is sort of the Greek chorus of the story. And it's a big mystery as to why it's still alive and why it's left there for him. And it's basically, it has the owl. It has everything that we've done in one place. This is really like something I've been planning for 4 or 5 years. I first pitched it to Sean Murphy when I thought Greg would be busy still doing Batman with me as a kind of special project. And then Sean did this amazing book called White Knight, which everyone should pick up, and made such a definitive, it's so good, a definitive version of his own Batman that I talked to him a year ago and I was like, listen, Greg's actually free now. It makes more sense to do it with him, and your version of Batman is so much your own. He totally agreed. So Yeah, it's the way it should be. It's me and Greg doing our kind of final Batman story together. That's early winter. And then the last thing is, it's down the line, but American Vampire, we're going to bring it back in early 2020 for its 10th anniversary. But we're going to bring it back in a format that's different. So it's going to be a really big book. It's not, we're not going to do it quite the way we did serially. We're going to do it as like a one really big arc at once. So we're going to get started on that really soon. We're starting in winter into spring, when Rafa's done with some of the stuff he has on his plate. But we just planned it out together this year and sort of finalized it when we met up in San Francisco. And
I know my brother's excited about that. I told him I was going to be talking to you. He's like, ask him about American Vampire.
I can't wait. We've been dying to do it for a long time. This brings it up to the bicentennial. So this arc takes place in 1976. It deals with the paranoia of the 70s. It's got Evel Knievel flavors, Las Vegas flavors of the 70s. It's got the Tongue, which is the kind of evil band that worships the first monster, which is kind of the Tiamat of our series, is infiltrated sort of all forms of government. Everybody's on the run. It's very much like the 70s, and sort of its paranoia and disillusionment, and the Omen and the Exorcist and all that kind of stuff. So this arc will bring everything up to the present at the end. So it's really it's a big culmination of everything we've been planning in one place. It's going to be a big kind of, almost 200-page story. So that's all the way down the field. There are a couple of things I can't talk about that'll be surprise things on the side, but above all, that's the major sort of roadmap for me over the next couple of years. And again, if I could say anything to everybody watching, I mean, this is all a new YouTube. I've been so in love watching your channel and getting to know all this stuff. It's like a new world to me, but people have been so supportive of our work through YouTube, through everything that I've done. I realized getting into it how long the support has been there that I didn't see, and I just wanted to apologize for not seeing it and saying thank you to everybody that's done reviews of our stuff, that supports our stuff, supports the books I've done in the past, the books I'm doing now. It really means the world, and I'm hoping to give back a little bit with it. Like you said, I started a channel. It's just baby. It's I barely know how to work a camera, but the purpose of it really is just to have a direct line to fans and be able to talk about the stuff I'm excited about, that I'm working about, but also talk about craft with other creators, talk about the industry with other creators, tell war stories and anecdotes. So I've already had Sean Murphy and Brian Edward Hill on, and we talked about villains. We talked about beginnings, like how to begin a story, how to create a great villain, told con stories and embarrassing stuff. And then it gives me a chance to just sort of have a direct line and be able to answer questions and talk to you guys without some of the filters that are there when we do it through publicity and all that stuff. So I really enjoy it. And just thank you guys again for giving me this life, being able to do comics every day. So, and thank you, Benny. I really appreciate it. It's been a joy. We got to do it more often.
We do. This is a lot of fun. Dude. No, you didn't. Everything you've said, I've just been listening intently to. But thank you so much. I think that's a good place to leave it off then. I'll intro a lot of the stuff at the beginning, and this is the outro. So if you guys are watching this, I'm not sure that camera I should be looking at right now. But thank you guys so much. If you enjoyed this, let me know in the comments down below. Let Scott know in the comments down below if you want more of this, any more questions you want for the next one, that kind of a thing. And we'll see you on the next episode of Comicstorian right here.